Played quite a few mediocre games over the course of 2025, but not everything was disappointing. So this list is kinda hard to describe as it's entirely subjective, considering that disappointment does not necessarily translate to something bad. For some reason it was just disappointing. Maybe it had high potential, but some bad decision making or game not delivering where it should considering the genre, or whatever else the reason might be. I'll try to explain as best as I can why these games disappointed me the most in the previous year. The worst and most disappointing game would easily be Rise of the Ronin, but it was released in 2024 on PlayStation 5, so it's not from 2025. This list consists only of games fully released in 2025 for the first time. Also, an important bit of info is that I've worked on myself over the years to not have any expectations when starting new games, to give each game a fair chance. That means disappointment for me is not a common feeling, because it's hard to be disappointed without expectations. Though some games manage to invoke that nonetheless for whatever reason. So let's get started, you subpar bastards. At number 6 is Hell Is Us, a game that created a brutal, unapologetic, war-torn world with good atmosphere and lore, but failed terribly in the gameplay department. While playing the demo, it was pretty clear already what is the biggest problem with the game, or so I thought at the time. For me, during the demo, the biggest problem was the realistic world mixed with way too supernatural. Enemies didn't really fit that well with the world, and combat style was completely out of place, with the main character picking up a sword and suddenly becoming an expert in everything. Weapons feeling plastic. Terrible enemy diversity. It just felt way too disconnected. Like playing two games in one. Then the full release came out and I was interested in what the full release would be like due to some really interesting parts and mechanics in the demo. Unfortunately, all those problems from the demo where things don't fit together took a backseat to the biggest problem, which is tedious and bland gameplay, mainly combat. Ended up being a basic one-button spam, mostly with 5 different enemies throughout the game. Next to all the problems mentioned from the demo going strong in the full release as well. The disappointing part for me were the creative decisions to mix things that don't mix well at all, like the combat style with the realistic world. Lack of combat depth despite really interesting enemy design. Lack of enemy variety. Such a shame, because the world is really good with interesting story, factions and lore. Hell Is Us is not a bad game, it's just a very disconnected one with some questionable decisions creatively and mechanically. At number 5 is Lost Soul Aside. I rarely play games that have almost nothing good about them. Plenty of games with some good, mixed with some bad and mediocre. But a game with nothing good is rare. Lost Soul Aside is that game. DMC style action RPG that is so generic and bland in everything it does, it's baffling how this got through and published. Every game needs a hook, something that it's going to be remembered by and where it stands out a bit. For example, in Hell Is Us is the world and lore. In Lost Soul Aside, nothing. There's really nothing standing out. Combat is nowhere near the level of something like DMC or Bayonetta. It's not bad, it's just not particularly good. And that's the best aspect of the whole game. Played it for about 7 hours and gave up. You know something's not right when the game offers 4 weapons to be switched on the fly, which makes combat incredibly dynamic, and yet still not interesting enough. Bosses are solid though, best part of the game. A bit too easy from what I remember. Rest of the game, much worse. Writing is trash, characters are as interesting as a puddle, the world is way too linear, no exploration, character progression system is mediocre, some interesting worlds mixed with bland and generic ones. It's one of the most forgettable games I've played recently. So forgettable that I had to remind myself how the game even looks. Rewatched my early review video just to remember something about it. Can't recommend Lost Soul Aside to anyone. At number 4 is Outer Worlds 2. Far from a bad game, but the brief experience I had with it was so underwhelming. Played through the first one and thought it is somewhere around okay and good. Second one had a decent opening, but then the first planet we landed on afterwards showcased all the problems. While combat is okay, combat encounters are quite subpar. Enemy groups in a lot of cases just continue spawning, which plays as a simple wave-based encounter with bullet sponges. A game's way to artificially up the difficulty where possible to keep things a bit more interesting. Enemy groups consist mostly of copy-paste models that do the same thing, with occasional different archetype thrown in between to mix things up at least a little bit. Usually human groups have more archetype diversity. Then the worst thing about that early planet is the art style. Bright, vivid mix of rainbow colors that makes the game look like a kid's playground. Unfortunately, such choice in art style leads to no atmosphere whatsoever. Strange that the game so colorful can be so bland. Dialogue was alright at times, I thought, during an early game, but there were a lot of hit and miss moments where the dialogue dragged on, affecting the game's overall pace negatively. A lot of the NPCs have way too much to say, in my opinion. It's difficult to keep a high interest in everyone's story, and it's difficult to create so many interesting stories. Short and sweet is the method Obsidian would have benefited from for some of the interactions. One good interaction that drags on is not a problem because it's interesting, with choices on how to impact it. But when tons of interactions ended up being too long, with most of them not nearly as interesting as that good interaction, while the player is already a bit fatigued from that first good interaction, then the overall fatigue with the game can set in. There's some more writing issues, including woke elements that really don't help the game, with most NPCs being quite bland. As I said, not a bad game, but quite an underwhelming and mediocre one from my brief experience with it. Made me abandon the game early on due to missing the beat on so many occasions without the ability to drag me in deeper, which is something RPGs should do quite easily. It's a game that's just there. For people that have barely or maybe never played any RPGs of the similar sort, it might seem much better than it actually is. I'd say that for people that play all sorts of RPGs for a long time now, Outer Worlds 2 is quite a forgettable and mediocre experience. At number 3 is Bloodlines 2. What a shit show the development of this game ended up being. It's a miracle that was even released. Again, not a bad game, though not far from it in my opinion, but an underwhelming one. Biggest disappointment was the fact it was far from an RPG experience compared to the original Bloodlines. It plays more like an action-adventure than anything else, which made the game more generic than unique. Mostly bland too, but not as bad as some are saying. Combat is good for an action game, very dynamic, can be challenging at times, great abilities. Problems are terrible enemy diversity with the same few models spread throughout the game, lack of different finishers, enemies sliding way too much while using melee strikes. Next to that, stealth is a bit too basic. All of this is not even close to the game's biggest problems. On PC, performance is terrible. World is as dead as it can be, empty, lifeless, boring. Side quests are some of the worst I've seen in a long time. Plenty missed story decision opportunities. Terrible endings. Fabian's flashbacks being walking simulators that ruin the overall pacing. Main vampire character is called Fire, which is so stupid on so many levels. Though there were some good things, characters in the game are awesome. There's some interesting story bits and pieces connected to the lore. City traversal is smooth and fast. Unfortunately, selling this game as Bloodlines was a bad choice. That creates expectations to live up to the style of the original, or at least try to. While combat is a definite improvement over the original, almost nothing else is. Dumbed down role-playing elements with so many subpar and terrible aspects simply can't save Bloodlines 2, no matter what name it has in the title. It's at best a mediocre game, and that's a stretch. Could have been a lot better with more creative ideas on side quests, city, story decisions and better endings. It's just disappointing to me how bad some of the things in this game are, like side quests that are 1 out of 10, unacceptable. Moving on. At number 2 is Swordhaven. If you're familiar with Atom RPG, then you know what the problem is with Swordhaven. It's an Atom RPG copy-paste game set in what seems to be medieval times. This is why it goes so high up on this list. It's not bad at all, but to what degree it copies Atom RPG is ridiculous. Exactly the same world style with mostly similar encounters, same crappy inventory system, same subpar companion system, same subpar combat that is so basic it's frustrating, and what's even worse, copied almost to the letter from Atom RPG without any significant improvements, just this time without guns. They even marketed it as a game inspired by old Baldur's Gate, which is laughable. Atom RPG is already a copy of Fallout, and then they released Swordhaven, which is a copy of Atom RPG, and market it as something similar to old Baldur's Gate. That's just insulting to everyone on so many levels. Basically, those are the reasons why it's on the most disappointing list. If you haven't played Atom RPG, then maybe Swordhaven can provide a different experience that could be cherished to a not very high degree, and that is the best I can say about it. Not bad, but a blatant copy with a different title. At number 1 is Avowed. Oof, this game disappointed me a lot. I've watched some trailers and followed the development more than usual because it is the first Obsidian game under Microsoft. When Microsoft bought Obsidian and In Exile, I was scared that it's over for CRPGs, with a new dark era of CRPGs coming with very few titles releasing in years to come. Lo and behold, the first game announced is a first-person RPG. Alright, that's fine. Obsidian did create Fallout New Vegas, by far the best of Fallouts after Bethesda purchased the license. So let's see what they can do. Gotta give people a chance to do their best. And if Avowed is their best, then Obsidian is done. 2 of their games are on this list, which speaks volumes. Avowed being the worst one without a doubt. I've played through it, and upon revisiting the review, I gave it maybe too high of a score. Again, a mediocre game that suffers from similar problems as Outer Worlds 2. Art style that can't create emotion due to no atmosphere, lack of any deeper systems like crime, punishment, social skills, far worse dialogue and NPC writing than Outer Worlds 2, basic stealth, terrible enemy design where most enemies have at most 3 different attacks, predictable quest outcomes, woke as fuck to the point of being detrimental to the game. There's so many problems that continued to increase the disappointment levels as I progressed through it. It's not all bad though. Story is good, believe it or not. There's some interesting decisions to be made. The UI is good. Combat is really good, with focus on the dual wield mechanic that allows dynamic and diverse playstyle combinations. Enemy AI is not bad despite their lacking offensive arsenal. Enemy group setups are decent. Sound effects are fantastic. Great inventory. So it's not that the game is bad or anything like that, it's just that Obsidian that we know has really dropped the ball in a lot of Avowed aspects which seemed quite unusual for Obsidian. This disappointed me greatly. Some of the things improved with Outer Worlds 2, but a lot of it remains the same. Fact that Obsidian, once beloved studio, is satisfied with games like Avowed and Outer Worlds 2 is disappointing to me, especially after incredible games like Pillars of Eternity and Tyranny. While Avowed definitely isn't the worst game on this list, it is for me the most disappointing because of the timing and things surrounding Obsidian. Unfortunately, it showcased what I feared is coming after the Microsoft purchase, and that is a significant drop in quality. I just hope that Clockwork Revolution doesn't disappoint as much, otherwise we have lost 2 giants most likely forever. Well, that's my list, entirely subjective, and as such it is what it is. Patreon subscribes are links in the description, full reviews are now there exclusively, thanks for watching and see you soon.